You cannot have Skylanders without puns.
Gotta have some humor in there.
Humor, also known as funny bone. Alright, that was a terrible pun.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. Fun editing, make sure to add some crickets chirping in there.
This is Chill Bill coming at you live from K-Troll, here to introduce another exciting episode of Skylanders Portalcasters, the podcast discussing anything and everything Skylanders. Over to you.
Thank you for that amazing introduction, Chill Bill. And welcome everybody to the first episode of Season 4 of Skylanders Portalcasters. I am your host, Mia, formerly known as GF Ditto, and also now known as Scarlet Ninjini on all socials. And I am joined today by my co-host, Holly, also commonly known as Inklander, and today's special guest star as well, Crystal Blazier, to discuss the various mobile games that existed throughout the franchise.
Hello, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Managing the forums and all that, and looking over the Skylands community.
Oh, awesome. And I'm excited to be back for my first episode as a full-time co-host again. It's going to be quite fun, I think.
Right, we're in for quite the adventure.
Oh, absolutely. So, over the years, we had a lot of different Skylanders mobile games get released, and for this episode in particular, we're not even talking about the 3DS games, which there were a wide variety of those as well, but we're talking about like all the ones that were released on mobile devices, effectively. So there were actually quite a few, like way more than I thought, as I was like trying to compile a list of like, what are the notes going to be for this episode? And it's like, there were like 3, right? And it's like, no, there's like 7.
There are quite a few, and they were really varied in what they were in their functionalities and their genres, and it's kind of really interesting to look back on and dive into it.
Each mobile game, you can see that they added different things for the Skylanders franchise. Like, what else could they do for a mobile game of Skylanders and all that?
Yeah, that's true. So, Crystal, with you being our guest, do you want to pick the game that we start off discussing first?
I'll choose Universe. Originally, it was called Skylanders Spyro's Universe, but they later changed it to just Skylanders Universe.
I got into the franchise with Giants, and it was one of those things where I don't think I even knew that it existed. And so with Universe, it's one of those ones where it's like the only like remnants of it I see are like through living just vicarious visions, you might say, but vicariously through just seeing what people have posted about Universe online. And so I think it's kind of interesting because it definitely has this feel of almost being like a Webkins kind of like game, being in that kind of genre, or being a Club Penguin in many ways, where it's you're online, you're able to see other users, there's mini games you can play, there's like gold you can get, there's interactable things in the overworld. So it seems like it's like a fun little thing to be able to like hop into, but it didn't really seem to be like a full experience. But that's just the impressions I've got from seeing it online.
Yeah, it was in beta, like during the first year when Spyro's Adventure was released. People were able to log in and put in their collections, see about their Skylanders, and play around with other people. It was around the time when the first game was released, and that's when the game was booming with lots of players.
So I guess overall, do you feel like you had positive memories of that game?
Yes, I did enjoy playing it a whole lot. You would go in and you would see your Skylanders and you choose which Skylander to play as, play mini games, or you can go on the mainland and see other Portal Masters playing as their Skylanders, going to other places on the game, seeing other characters, playing mini games, making funny dances at the fountain area. It was also surreal, man. It was fun.
Yeah, it's one of those things where Skylanders never really ended up diving into the like online scene that much. Like, we had racing and we had online like multiplayer functionality introduced in Superchargers, and we also had like local co-op, but this was like one of those things where it's like, wow, this is cool. Like, there's actually like lots of people online playing this, and that's kind of like a novelty that we didn't really ever get with any other Skylanders game.
Yeah, and you could like also go to your home, like your lair as they called it, and see all your Skylanders you put in, your magic items, and see the lore tablets. Then you just do things at your own pace. Customize your island with elements, flowers, fight off sky pirates.
Yes, they also had the like Angry Birds mini game in
Oh,
it.
yep.
Yeah, as one who was kind of late to the party, I never got to experience that particular mobile game. But from what I have seen of it, especially in regards to the minigames all appear to be like Skylanders branded versions of like popular Flash games or popular like early stage mobile games like Angry Birds.
And Farmville too, with Skylanders Lost Islands.
Oh, well, that's a great segue right there. Yeah, so Lost Islands lasted longer than Universe did, and that was one of those like time management things where it's all about like resource management and farming and things like that, where you're trying to get money and various different resources and energy to be able to continue to just keep growing your town, which is pretty cool.
And you could also like unlock new characters or existing characters you see in the games, the non-playable ones like Hugo, Flynn, Callie, all the other NPCs you see, even from Swap Force. And with those characters, you could boost your plant stats or how your Skylanders finish their tasks and all that. It was a neat feature.
And one of the things that I think we talk about with Universe is like you're able to bring in your Skylanders to the game, but you're able to do that in Lost Islands as well. Like, yes, they do have the whole like gotcha, like gimmicky kind of stuff if you wanted to do that or didn't have the figures or the codes or anything to go that route. But I do also really like how these games on the mobile side were trying to integrate into that same kind of Skylanders experience where it was still like toys to life in many ways.
I do really respect their decision to not make the gacha mechanics required and to allow you to use the characters you've already purchased. Otherwise, it would have been the whole thing of, well, now I'm paying twice for the same character. Why did I even bother to begin with, type of thing. So, like, I really respect their choice to make that optional, so those who couldn't afford to, like, regularly purchase the figures could still play and enjoy this Skylanders game, and those who did purchase the figures and had a collection going could just import their collection. It was already there.
Yeah, you could use your codes that came with your figures, or you could use a Portal Power to do it. Saves time.
That also makes these games like more enjoyable in many ways, where it's like, yeah, if I'm able to like bring my collection forward into all of these games, really feels like it adds value to all of it, and it makes you want to engage more in the games, it feels like, because all of it just feels like it's adding to the world building even more.
Especially with the world building and the lore behind the Portal Masters themselves, now you're sending your Skylanders into even more realms. It kind of just really is an enhancement.
And you could also build them houses.
Skylanders Happy Home Designer. Sort of. It's like a cute like little mini game thing that has some time management stuff. So like Lost Islands, it's one of those where it's like, is it anything like super special? Like, not really, but it adds like a nice Skylanders coat of paint to it, which can make it have a little bit more charm.
One of the things I liked about it was that they went out their way to create like different Skylanders, different variants of the Skylanders that you can only get in this game, like Admiral Dumpback, Buddy Wrecking Ball, Skeletal Cinder, all those seasonal variants that you can only get in this game. Like, whoa.
Oh yeah, like I think they had like a holiday washbuckler and snapshot and various things like that.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, which is like cool. Like I do also like that idea as well, where you're able to get additional versions of these characters that aren't actually like figures, but it's just another way to like kind of extend that fun of Skylanders, because whenever it comes to something like being able to go out and try to find these figures or collect them or get variants of it, it really plays into the collecting side of it in many ways, where it's like if you like doing the Skylander hunting, it just kind of added to it in this this game in many ways, because they just gave you more things to collect.
Yeah, and also other stuff too. Like they added villains into the game when Trap Team was released. Like have your Skylanders fight off villains and all that. You collect the villains too.
Yeah, it's interesting how this game, I'd say probably out of all of them, other than maybe Ring of Heroes, got the most support. Like, all the other ones seem to have fallen off, like, relatively, like, fast after, like, a year or two. But then, like, this game did just keep going across 4 of the games, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it lasted about, like, 4 years, I think. 4 years longer than Ring of Heroes and all the others.
And so I guess kind of moving through the list, another one that would have come out around that time would be Cloud Patrol, which is more of like a shooter in a way, where it feels more like an arcade shooter where you're trying to shoot down trolls and move on from the next troll camp to the next one.
Yeah, I never really actually played that much of Cloud Patrol since it got a little bit repetitive for me. Like you can add your characters with the card codes and you just use them for bonuses and magic items too to help you take down the trolls in a quick amount of time. I haven't played that much of it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it is like repetitive, but I think the big like gimmick around that one is like, how do you increase your score? How do you like multiply it? And so I think it's pretty cool that they went for that arcade kind of feel with this game, because they even actually made actual arcade machine versions of it. You can't really find nowadays, but every once in a while you might see one go up on like eBay or on like some sort of website. I think SEL Matt posted something about it on Twitter, finding one at Disney.
In a Disney Animal Kingdom resort. And Toys for Bob has an arcade machine in their studio too.
That I did not know about that.
That's really cool to know.
Yeah, I saw them in one of their recent videos or photos, and they still have it in there.
I mean, might as well. It's like a really
A
cool
relic.
Yeah, it's just really cool. Even if like the gameplay of it is maybe not the most exciting and it's definitely repetitive because it's trying to go for the arcade kind of feel, it's still like a neat piece of like Skylanders history of, yeah, this released on iPad, but oh yeah, it was also an arcade machine.
Yeah, it's like made for arcade, so it's better suited for that.
You can definitely tell that for sure with the way that it's all set up to try to like get those combos and be very like touchscreen. You're trying to go as fast as possible.
Yep, and the faster you go, the bigger your score is.
They definitely succeeded in making it feel like an arcade game. And I could see how those cabinets would have worked really, really well in the right places.
And I'm surprised that they actually made like arcade machines of the game. Like you would think they would keep it on mobile, but no, they made actual arcade machines of Cloud Patrol, and they put it in actual theme parks.
Yeah, I think that goes to show just how popular Skylanders was in what would that have been 2012, 2013. It was this multi-billion-dollar franchise. Activision Blizzard was just raking it in.
It was so popular that you almost couldn't walk into any store out there without encountering Skylanders of some kind.
Yeah, it was booming. Like after the release of the first game, like they said, it was the #1 kids game of 2011. So they had to like rake in what they wanted to do with the franchise and what they could do with it, what else they could do with it.
Yeah, and I think having this discussion about mobile games, it really does show how like varied they were willing to like take the franchise, because the thing that I do love about Skylanders as a whole was like they could have done something very derivative every year. They could have just like released a sequel that maybe had more core Skylanders and that was about it. But no, they were like, all right, we're going to add in lights to the figures. We're going to add in swappability. We're going to make changes to the portal. We're going to try these other things like making accessories. We'll make controllers. We'll make arcade games. It just, eventually they got a TV show. Skylanders was never afraid to like push the boundaries of like, how far can we take this? Where can we go with this? And that's something that I like about it a lot.
And they pumped them out year after year too. They were milking it.
Now we can only hope for Skylanders stuff in Crash Team Rumble. That's my hope.
I would be very surprised if they include a Skylander in Crash Team Rumble.
I'll take Stealth Elf.
Or Eruptor, or Gill Grunt, or Trigger Happy.
They also work too. Yes. I mean, if we got some Spyro rep, it's like we could get 2 Skylanders characters, right?
Oh yeah, Skylanders Spyro and regular Spyro in one game.
Feel like it would make the various parts of the Spyro fandom just go crazy. It's like, oh no, now we have to argue about the designs of them again.
They have their own Spyro in the game too. They can't complain.
One might think
And
that.
yet they do.
Yeah, they added reignited Spyro. What's the harm of adding Skylander Spyro in there? Maybe as a skin, like a customizable skin or something, you know?
See, I think that'd be
Yeah.
fun. So, moving on, the next one that we have is Battlegrounds, which is one that I actually played a lot of when it released. That was eventually by a time that I had kind of gotten really into Skylanders, and I had bought one of the starter packs for Battlegrounds. So I actually got Royal Double Trouble and everything like that from the starter pack. And I actually like this game a lot. It's one of those things where it can feel a little samey. It's like all the different levels are just similar in the way that they play, but the battles actually felt pretty good. Like they were real-time combat, which was something that I was actually very surprised from with a mobile game, where while the overworld maps would be grid-based and you would have to like try to avoid enemies and try to grab items on the overworld and things like that.
I never actually got to play Battlegrounds. I saw gameplay videos online, but I know that they changed some of the characters and enemies of the game. Like, they named Chompy Mage Vengar for some reason. Like, what? That's the Chompy Mage, but it's called Vengar in Battlegrounds.
Yes, they did that with, I think, all of them. Like, all the, like, main, like, villains where they were definitely, like, pulled from Fires Adventure and Giants. Yeah, they did give them, like, different names than what they actually were in the main games, which is kind of odd, but the gameplay was decent. Like, it was fine. Like, you were able to get special attacks for your Skylanders, and the collectability aspect felt fine. You were much like as we discussed with Lost Islands, you were able to bring your collection in via using the portal or using codes. So it was just another way to kind of like expand the world. And I think Battlegrounds had support through Swap Force. But yeah, I remember like playing a lot of that. It was one of those games where I'd just like pull out my phone whenever I was like waiting in the like dentist office or whatever. That's enough time to play like a Battlegrounds map or something.
Yeah, we all have those times where we need to like go onto our phones and play Skylanders to buy the time.
Yeah, I'd say the only like major negative about Battlegrounds, other than the whole like weird naming thing, is that Shroom Boom is your starter character.
Yeah, that was an awful decision.
Yeah.
And usually I don't usually play card games, but the way they develop Battlecast, like you buy a card and you get to see your Skylanders come to life in the game and see how they fight against the opponents in story mode or player versus player. It drew me in. Like, what else could they do with it? What else would they add to the table in this game?
Yeah, it was one of those games that I think was really interesting. At the time that it came out, I think it was pretty into Hearthstone. So seeing that from sort of the same publisher using a similar-ish system, I was definitely excited about it, considering like it had some pretty interesting mechanics where you were able to, based on what Skylanders you picked, you were able to get access to different cards. And the mana system in it was really interesting because it was like almost like a coin flip, which was kind of weird because typically, you know, in any other card game like Magic or Pokemon or something, you would actually have to like build up energy or like mana over time. But here it was like very like randomized as to what you could do on your turns, which made it kind of more interesting because there was a random element to your planning. But overall, yeah, like I thought the idea of like a Skylanders card game was great, especially because the first couple games through Trap Team had cards. We just couldn't do anything with them really. They were just there. So actually introducing like a card game that had mechanics that people could play with, and it also had a Toys to Life element to where you could scan them into the game, I thought this was a pretty cool concept.
And you could also like use your phone to see your Skylanders come to life on your card. You know, where you hold your card and you hold your phone on the other hand. And you can see your Skylander just spring out of the card right in your hand or wherever you put them in.
That sort of like AR functionality is actually really, really cool to see every time, because it just adds an element of life to what would normally be very mundane.
Other card games that have like digital elements to them, like say the Pokemon trading card game, those would just come with like cards that would have codes in them that would just give you the cards. Like you just type in the code and it's like, all right, we added all the cards to your digital library, and it's like, oh, that's cool. But here actually like being able to scan them in, that was always pretty neat. I feel like that added a lot more like value and excitement to it.
It really did, especially because, like, with you bring up the Pokemon trading card game, when you put in the code card from, like, say, a booster pack, they gave you a randomized booster pack in the game that didn't necessarily, and in fact, most of the time did not have the same cards that you had already pulled. So it was very different an experience to just get random cards out of it than what Battlecast offered with transporting your card directly in.
Yeah, I remember that we could also buy the cards in stores too, in battle packs and booster packs. Some were even in cereal boxes. I think the last two cards were Sonic Boom and Prism Break before they closed down the game.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, I like remember going and buying many cereal boxes in order to be able to like try to find all of the like cards that they released in them. I think I also remember SEL Matt put out a video about that where I think he went and bought like 10 Cinnamon Toast Crunch boxes. It was like, I guess I'm eating this for a while, but I needed the cards.
I usually just buy the cereal boxes I usually get and they're going to get the cards, so I don't be wasting money and all.
Like, I missed out on the whole cereal box thing, but for a while there, I was opening Battlecast cards like booster boxes at a time, and I really, really enjoyed that and the hunt for the cards that I was missing.
One of the things where I think they'd probably already announced that the game was shutting down when I got the vast majority of my collection for Battlecast, because I remember distinctly I walked into a GameStop one time and they just had stacks of the like larger booster boxes just like laying on the counter, and I was like, what are you all doing with those? And they're like, oh, these are just getting massively discounted because we're trying to get rid of them, so like each one's like $1.50. I was like, sold, I will take all of them. So I think I went home with like 10 or 12 of them and just like opened them up. So I still don't think that I have all of the cards, but I have like, I think the vast majority of them all.
I actually got a couple of cards, like a handful of them actually. I still have them somewhere in my room, and I usually get my favorite cards, and I love the card art they did on all of them. Like, they explored ideas for what the Skylanders could do for attacks, and they even brought in villains too, their villain art.
I really liked the art on the cards, and you could also get the foil cards as well. I think they looked really nice, and I think the idea of being able to scan them in and using the bleed of the card to be able to be the code based on all the like notches in it, like that was such a like fun idea. Yeah, it was such an interesting idea that Light Seekers did it as well a few years later, where they were trying to be like very Skylanders like, and they were introducing their card game, and they just saw what Battlecast had done and they were like, yep, that we'll do that too. Sadly, I guess Light Seekers didn't necessarily do that well either, but I guess such is the Toys to Life market when it became so saturated at that time anyway.
I think they did it too late too, because they did it just as the market was shutting down.
I have to wonder how well Light Seekers would have done if it had just released like 2 or 3 years earlier, or if it was like releasing now. If they were releasing it now, I'm sure like so many people would probably flock to it, because it's been a decent amount of time since Skylanders, and no one's really doing it. Like, Amiibo's still a thing, I guess, but it's been a while since Starlink happened too, so I think we're slowly starting to approach that time of like, yeah, maybe we'll start to see something else. Might not be Skylanders like everyone wants it to be, but
only time will tell.
That is true. Battlecast, it didn't last that long either. I think by the time we hit Imaginators, it was like shutting down. It's hard to remember all the timelines for it at this point because it's been so long. But I think it only lasted like a year or a year and a half before they shut it down, which is definitely disappointing. You can still play it physically, but now that the Skylanders website is down, the instructions that they put up are no longer like available through Activision by any means.
They shut down the whole website. Like, well, you can only view it through Web Archive or the archive machine, like not through regular. Because if you go to the Skylanders website now, it'll redirect you to the Activision site that has the Skylanders Imaginators page, and that's it.
For Mia, I think I had to like give you the instructions on how to play it physically because I just conveniently happened to have it downloaded onto my computer.
Right, so you had to send it to me because I was interested in learning how to play, especially physically, because the game was no longer online. And I just really enjoy card games, so it was something that I really just wanted to experience. And yeah, I scoured the internet and couldn't find anything, so I had to reach out to Holly and be like, do you know where I can find this? Just for her to turn around and be like, oh yeah, I'll send you that.
This is what happens when you never delete anything off your computer, and when you run out of space, you're just like, yep, I'll just attach another 5 terabyte hard drive and keep going for another couple of years.
Sometimes that's the best way to go.
So, as Battlecast was happening during the Superchargers era, once we hit Imaginators, we got a completely different kind of mobile app that wasn't really a game at all, which was the Imaginators Creator app, which I also used a lot because I ordered way too many of those cards. I think I have like 40 of them.
I spent a ton of time in the Creator app just designing more and more and more Imaginators, especially as I was collecting crystals. I wanted to make sure to get designs ready before I activated the crystals, because trying to get that battle class reset if I did it wrong was an absolute pain. I still have the app on my iPad, and I probably have about 60 different Skylanders designs that never made it onto a creation crystal because I just went crazy in designing them.
I first used the Creator app to design my first Skylander, and I used it to like design it in the game too as soon as I got enough Imaginator parts for her. And I also used the app to order a custom figure of my Imaginators. It costed around $50 for it to be made, and I can see why. So they had to 3D print all of it and then color it. Then you gotta put it in a airtight dome to protect it, and they ship it out. I got like 5 of my Imaginators 3D printed, including one for my dad. So it's a real gem. I got real gems.
Yeah, it's so cool. The idea of it, being able to just make your own Skylanders, put them on a t-shirt or put them on cards or actually get them 3D printed. Like that was such a fun idea. And the Creator app is just so intuitive. You're able to customize things as much or as little as you want. It just gave you all the tools that you could really possibly want for two-legged Skylanders anyway, to really just let your imagination run wild and do anything. And, you know, the Creator app didn't really have any, like, gamification to it. Like, they would have chests where, like, you could open them every, like, hour or two, or, like, every day. But, like, you could also transfer Skylanders over from the game into the app and be able to, like, get them uploaded that way. And I think that's pretty cool too.
That was actually my only gripe with how the app functioned, was when transferring your character from within the game itself to the app on your mobile device, they used a very high-pitched sound-based transfer, and that got really, really difficult to deal with really quickly.
Yeah, it annoyed me too. Like, they could have added something better with that, not just making those high-pitched sounds.
Right, and to this day, I still use that feature, but it's obnoxious.
Yeah, I know. Like, I still have it on my phone as well, apparently. It was definitely fun. The app was just a great addition to what was already a cool game. Like, you were already able to make your own Skylanders, but the fact that you could actually make your own Skylanders if you really wanted to, that was just very unique.
Yeah, if you wanted to make your Skylander on the go, then the Creator app was the app to do. And a lot of fans were like upset that it was gone, and some were glad they still have it on their phones.
Yeah, like we have other games that were released as well that are like no longer on the App Store. Like for instance, Skylanders Trap Team as well. Like I still have just the full game on my phone, which I guess it's one of those things where it's like, would you necessarily like call that a mobile game? Like they had mobile starter packs for Trap Team and Superchargers, you know, and they were just the full game on mobile. They might have not looked the best or played the best, but they were still there and they were still options. So, yes, I can still play Trap Team on my phone if I wanted to as well. I never do it, but I could if I wanted to.
Fair enough. That leaves only one game left on this list, doesn't it?
It does. The most recent one, which also sadly died, which I actually got to be one of the beta testers on, so that's fun. But yeah, Ring of Heroes was an interesting, like, turn-based combat kind of thing that I think had a decent amount of replayability and depth to it. And Crystal, I know that you like uploaded like the whole game, I think, through like Let's Plays on your channel.
Yeah, I uploaded the first version, the beta version, when I played through Ring of Heroes. And I actually remember like seeing the community managers of Ring of Heroes at E3 2018. And they were advertising the beta. It was a change of pace, like an RPG. Your Skylanders looking epic looking, and it's basically like Come to Us's other game, like Summoner's War version of Skylanders.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely played into that as well. And that's just another one of those things where, like, each of these apps that we've talked about, it's like entirely different. Where, like, we've had our real time strategy, we've had our card game, we've had our, like, creator app, which is not really even a game. Yeah, having Ring of Heroes be this interesting, like, turn based kind of strategy game was actually pretty cool and a pretty interesting change of pace.
I liked a lot of the concepts behind Ring of Heroes. It was actually really well thought out, and I feel like it was pretty inspired. The only real downside to it, in my opinion, was that they leaned into the whole gacha mechanics thing. There was no way to use your actual figures in the game. You had to deal with the gacha mechanics, so you could never even guarantee that you would get your favorite character at all.
What I like about Ring of Heroes is that they introduced awaken forms. Your Skylanders having different accessories when they have enough items or relics. They gain a new form, become more powerful, look different. And Come to Us had a lot of things going on for the game. They had a lot of ideas. They added original villains, bosses, like the Spellpunk Librarian, the Ruin Guardians, and they even added bosses and more levels that you see for the Skylanders universe. And it's a shame because they had a lot more planned. Like, they were planning to add Malefor into the game, the undead Dragon King that played a role in a few of the Skylanders and appeared in the comics. Like, he was going to make an appearance, but when Ring of Heroes shut down, like, nah, he's not going to appear. And there were even plans for nightmare villains from Skylanders Trap Team 3DS appear in the game, and Evil Eyes Glumshanks from Swap Force. All those scrapped ideas that will never see the light of day.
And it's pretty disappointing. I do have to echo Mia's sentiment in that I remember when I was doing the whole like beta test part of it, and I was like, well, wait, where do I go to enter in my Skylanders code? And I was like, oh, it's not there. It's not in the game. So this was like the first one where, yes, like it took place after like the whole Skylanders Toys to Life craze. And like they definitely were trying to do something different with it. But I definitely remember it being very jarring in a way to where like all my other stuff integrated so well with the mainline games, and this was the first thing that didn't, and it took a while to like get over that feeling of like, oh, like I can't like scan them in with my portal, or I can't like use the code here. But I do have to say, like, yeah, the Awakened forums, definitely interesting. I think they had some cool designs, and in many ways it also reminded me a bit of Supercharging in a way, where we got like new looking reposes of like Gilgrunt and Trigger Happy. But I think it was good to see them trying to like push the boundaries of it and be like, all right, we're not just going to be like these other past mobile games where we're very derivative, which I mean, also like Lost Islands added in like special in-game variants as well, but they did try to push the boundaries of this, where it's not just like putting them into like a Santa hat or something. Like they actually tried to redesign some of these characters in interesting ways.
It was just a shame that those redesigns were also locked behind gacha mechanics.
Yep, yeah. In order to like get new Skylanders, you gotta put money into the Core of Lights, and whoosh, you either hope you get a new one or you just get a duplicate that powers up your existing Skylanders.
Yeah, that is true. But there's other interesting ideas with this as well, because in this game, the idea of the Portal Masters actually being pulled into Skylands was interesting. And then when they redid the game, they played into that even more, in which they became actual playable characters that had different moves of their own.
That was really cool to see. Granted, it took away from the lore of us being the Portal Master, but actually seeing a playable Portal Master in Skylands also like adds to the lore immensely, and kind of plays off of what Chaos did in the very beginning of Giants. So it kind of shows that there are a lot of possibilities as to what happened like with the Portal Masters.
And we actually see the non-playable characters talk with the Portal Master too. Even the Skylanders, the villains, see how they interact. That's what I like.
Just the idea of that, though, where it's like, okay, we've had like so many characters get like drawn out of the game and pulled into the real world. What happens if we do it in reverse? That's fun. Like, that's a good idea. And like, as you said, like, it's very sad to know that so many of these ideas got scrapped. This was like the last like Skylanders game, effectively.
And what I really liked about it is that you could see like each Portal Master was elemental based. Like one was fire, one was earth, one was life, one was water. And there was going to be a magic Portal Master too, but they never made it in. We would have had elemental Portal Masters for Ring of Heroes, like one Portal Master for each element.
And that's also an interesting concept as well, because we have characters like Chaos, who are like masters of all the elements. So having Portal Masters with specializations is also kind of interesting as well, because that implies that technically your Portal Master you could change in ways, like you could specialize it, which I suppose is also implied with the Skylanders themselves being able to switch elements, is like they are able to master and learn a different element if they so chose.
Especially after the 2.0 rebuild, like there was a lot of potential in the Ring of Heroes game, and especially with the community like thirsting for more content, it was really just sad to see it all just go away.
Yeah, and they actually listened to feedback from the beta and they tried to improve it.
That is true, and I definitely think they were able to keep it going for a number of years, but sadly, like the fate with basically every mobile game, had to be shut down.
Yeah, I think probably Activision allowed the license to run out or didn't want to renew it, and that's probably why.
And so now the only hope is to eventually get some sort of other Skylanders content in the future. Who knows? Might take years, but we can hope for it someday.
Any source of Skylanders, like any new content, like anything. So fans are just itching for anything. Any rumor, any like fake leak or anything that they could find that has something new, Skylanders in it. We're just desperate or hungry for more.
That's because the Skylanders franchise kind of scratched an itch that no other franchise has.
Thank you so much for joining us for this segment. We appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. I had a good time.
As we wave goodbye to Crystal, the sounds of heavy footsteps echo through the halls of the Academy. As Brock comes marching down the corridor looking for us, he barks at us in his angriest voice, You destroyed my arena? Rumble Club is now open. Get there.
So here we are at Brock's request. We have been tasked with entering his new Rumble Clubhouse arena here at the Academy. And we were kind of expecting that we would have to fight, but it seems actually that he's just brought us an enemy to talk to and kind of evaluate here at the clubhouse. And that seems to be Big Bertha Bubblethorn from Skylanders Trap Team on the 3DS. So Mia, what are your thoughts on this character?
Okay, so Big Bertha Bubblethorn is like a giant Chompy reminiscent of the one that Chompy Mage can turn into, but with a more like purple and red coloration to it. And design-wise, I think that's actually really, really cool. It basically takes an idea we had for a couple of games and expands on it a little bit.
Yeah, her design kind of reminds me of all the like Chompy variations that we got in Skylanders Swap Force, and it just seems to kind of expand upon that idea, and I think that makes it kind of fun and unique to just see another like Chompy variation.
Right, exactly that, especially since we don't get very many variations at all on the larger Chompies. Her attack patterns are actually really super basic. She has like a ground pound with a shockwave and a sort of like belly bounce body shove style thing where basically she pushes enemies, which could be really handy for, dropping them off ledges. But that's about all there is to it. And when she's summoned into battle, you just get that ground pound and she's gone. So a super simple kit, but an effective one.
Yeah, it's one of those where I definitely really like the moveset, because not only do we see that used in her boss fight, but it's also something we can see her use against other enemies that she's fighting against, just like any other character out of Trap Team on the console games. But yeah, it can be kind of fun having, especially as Chompy Mage isn't in this game, kind of having like a similar kind of attack pattern that kind of takes the place of Chompy Mage, that is still able to do those ground pound shockwaves, but also adds still something that's kind of unique to it as well, especially as like an area kind of clear. I think it kind of be very helpful and beneficial to your Skylander that you're playing as, to be able to have a character who is almost entirely focused on like pushing enemies back or trying to like clear out the arena.
Right, it can be super helpful at times, especially when you get overwhelmed with enemies, which the 3DS isn't exactly known for, but there are times where you have a good number of them on screen, so it can work out very well that way.
That is very true. Big Bertha Bubblethorn, our inaugural 3DS villain that we have talked about. What would you rank her on a scale of 1 to 7, Mia?
On a scale of 1 to 7, Holly, I think I'd give Big Bertha, I'd rate her at a 5. Just above average. Cool design, effective moveset, I would definitely rank her above average. What about you, Holly? What would you rank Big Bertha Bubblethorn?
So for me, I would say that Big Bertha Bubblethorn is probably a 5 out of 7 as well. I don't think that she is anything particularly exciting, especially because half of her moveset is coming from Chompy Mage on the console versions, but it is trying to give you a little bit of something unique. It's also one of those things where the design feels like it helps shine through. It's oh hey, here's another Chompy variation. So because of all that, I would say definitely above neutral, definitely above a 4, but I don't think that this is a villain that I think people are going to think of first when they think of trappable villains from Trap Team.
That makes a lot of sense.
So that gives Big Bertha Bubblethorn a overall Brock's Baddies rating of 5 out of 7, which is not bad. And Brock, satisfied with that rating, seems like he's finally satisfied with us and is allowing us to leave the Rumble Clubhouse. And as we are doing so, Sharpfin suddenly comes running in very excitedly and says that the Dread Yacht is finally ready after it had been crashed last season, and that Flynn has something very exciting that he wants to show us.
We hurry over to where the dread yacht is docked, and Flynn is waiting for us, eager to board the dread yacht. He kind of wanders around a little bit at first, making sure that all the repairs are to his satisfaction, and we set sail. Flynn is humming to himself, something about how he's the best, as always. And when asked where we're going, he says simply, the library. The flight gets a little rough as Flynn pilots the dread yacht through a stack of giant books, and we land in the Spellpunk library from Skylanders Superchargers.
So the Spellpunk library from Skylanders Superchargers, I think, is a pretty unique level, because not exactly a very big level at all, but it has all of the gameplay pretty much, except for a couple treasure chests and hidden secrets and everything taking place inside the books of the library, which allows for some pretty interesting side-scrolling sections. Like, for instance, they're in a cel-shaded style, which looks pretty cool, but beyond that, all of the on-foot sections feel like a Mario platformer in many ways, in which you're able to even bounce on top of enemies to deal damage. We have the flying section, which also kind of mimics 1942 in many ways, the arcade game where you're flying around having to shoot down enemy planes and warships and things. And it's just one of those things where it feels like a very clever way to implement different gameplay mechanics through the storytelling.
It does feel exactly like that, and it was also a really interesting way to incorporate the different level stars, because, as always, you have the optional air and sea sections, but they also contribute really heavily to the story.
Yeah, that's very true. They're definitely, not bad by any means. It's I don't know, did the sky section really feel like it needed to be here? But in this case, it does kind of expand a lot more. I genuinely find both of the sections in this level, maybe the sea section a little less so, but I find both of the optional vehicle sections in this to be pretty fun. Especially because I like those top-down shooters like Galaga and everything like that, even though Galaga's not necessarily the exact same play style, but I like those quite a bit, and being able to have that kind of section within Skylanders is a lot of fun. And then the C section in many ways is also kind of interesting, because that one's more about the atmosphere, I feel, more than anything, about continuing to dive deeper and deeper into the sea, and you're trying to dodge things, and eventually you get chased by the Hydra at the end. And that's also a very fun callback to Spyro's Adventure, which a lot of this level is doing by reintroducing the Core of Light as a main concept and various things like that. So this level, I think, can be pretty fun because it is really trying to add on to the lore and the world building of everything that kind of got established in Spyro's Adventure.
This also would have been a great opportunity for them to introduce magic gear golems, but still no.
And the final vehicle section, which is the land vehicle section, it is pretty interesting to me because it in many ways mirrors the final boss fight, in which here we have it top down and side scrolling, in which we're having to dodge all of these obstacles that are in our way as we're trying to push the darkness back. But in many ways that is exactly what we're doing, but in 3D a couple levels later, in which we are having that final boss fight with the darkness, in which we are trying to push him back after the Dark Rift engine didn't exactly work as intended. So I find it to be a nice story parallel.
Right.
Other things I like about this level, other than just the aesthetics of the books, is also just the way that the level looks. I think it's very pretty. I think the just general atmosphere of it feels very unique, because we have had things like the library at the Academy in Trap Team, and as we see, that same set is effectively used later in the TV show. But here it felt very interesting, because it was a different kind of library, also set in the world that was owned by the Spellpunk, so it adds more to the Spellpunk lore as well, and just creates a different kind of setting for a level than what we're used to, because we're used to typically seeing these big grandiose Skylanders levels where you're able to kind of look ahead, and maybe further up ahead you're able to see the end of the level. But that's not the case in this level. It's all very condensed. You're able to kind of see the entire level within a couple seconds of walking around the level, and that just feels very unique and different, because the story progresses merely by when people find books.
That all being said, Holly, what would you rate the Spellpunk library on a scale of 1 to 7?
I would probably say that it's 6 out of 7 for me. I think the difference in gameplay is pretty interesting. It's pretty unique. It's a lot of fun. I think the general concept of this being a atypical Skylanders level, of being that condensed space, is also fun. I think artistically it's very nice. You can tell that the concept artists had a lot of fun designing this level. And the other fun part about it as well that I didn't even bring up is that Renee Auberjonois, who played Odo in Deep Space Nine and was also in Avatar and was also in the animated The Little Mermaid, like, his voice is used to narrate the stories here. And I think it's a lot of fun to hear that voice. And he continues on because, of course, on the next level, Gadfly Glades, he is the voice of Pomfrey LaFuzzbottom. So he is also the narrative cohesion of this level that is allowing us to hear these stories as they're told based on the actions that we're doing on screen. And I think that's also very fun as well. So overall, I would say a 6 out of 7 for me, just because it feels like it is lore expanding, but is also just its own cohesive thing, which I think is really nice to me. But Mia, what about you?
I think on a scale of 1 to 7, I would rank the Spellpunk library a solid 7, because of literally all the same reasons you just listed, and there's nothing really holding me back from that last point. There's no reason that I can come up with that I would take that away. I love the design, I love the gameplay of it, I especially love, like, what they did with the books and the older style gameplay mechanics and, like, the ambiance of the area, the storytelling. It was all just really, really well done. So I would say, from me, it's a solid 7 out of 7, which brings the Spellpunk library to an official Dread Yacht Destination rating of 6.5 out of 7.
So it is almost perfect, which I think pretty much describes this level pretty well.
Having found whatever information it was that Flynn actually needed here, we're still not sure what that may have been. We board the Dread Yacht and set sail back to the Academy, where Flynn docks a little harder than we would like to see for a freshly repaired ship, but it's Flynn, so do we expect any less? As Flynn secures the Dread Yacht to the dock, Hugo comes running up, tripping over himself in his excitement to see us, and his handbook falls off of his back and lands in front of us.
As the book falls open, the page that it's open to turns to a greenish glow and leaves begin falling out of it, and out pops Tree Rex with the catchphrase of "Be afraid of the bark." So Tree Rex is a character from Skylanders Giants and is one of the 8 giants introduced, and he has a couple pretty fun attacks. One of these is the Shockwave Slam, in which he is slamming the ground with his fists, causing shockwaves. Another one is the Sequoia Stampede, in which he is able to charge through enemies and obstacles. And then the other one being the Photosynthesis Cannon, in which he is able to harness the power of the sun and shoot light beams. All 3 of these attacks are kind of interesting. We have the Shockwave Slam, very similar to the Big Bertha Bubblethorn attack that we were discussing earlier. We have the Sequoia Stampede, and we also have the Photosynthesis Cannon. So the Photosynthesis Cannon is adding in that long range. The Shockwave Slam is trying to do that enemy clear, maybe to be able to help you with that long range. And then we also have the Sequoia Stampede, in which you're able to just kind of like try to charge through enemies as well. So you have lots of different ways to try to be able to deal with enemies here with these attacks. So Mia, what's your initial thoughts on Tree Rex?
My initial thoughts on Tree Rex are his design is very interesting. It's very big, very tree-like, which is what they were going for there. Kind of does really fit the name they gave him. All of its attack names are made to sound big because they were really leaning into the whole giant aesthetic. I found Tree Rex to be Not very maneuverable. So the Sequoia Stampede was just something I never really used much because T-Rex is basically too big and clunky to make it work right, in my opinion. On the other hand, I really enjoy the photosynthesis cannon. I thought it was a really cool concept, especially for a character whose, key feature is supposed to be their size. This cannon goes off pretty quickly, it's really effective, it has a good amount of range on it, and it pairs well with T-Rex's companion, which is a woodpecker that flies out and deals damage, and I believe that comes from T-Rex's soul gem. So between the residual damage from having that little animal companion always around, combined with the effectiveness of that cannon, the photosynthesis cannon, T-Rex's kit actually turns out to be really, really useful. And then if enemies get too close, you do have that pound attack that, like we were talking about with Big Bertha Bubblethorn, it's just good for enemy clearing when they get too close.
I can definitely agree with the Sequoia Stampede. I can understand not really using that one. That's probably the attack I don't use that much as well, mostly just because it's kind of hard to control and can feel a little clunky. That said, it does kind of fit with the whole, giant kind of vibe that they're going for with the character. Being able to do all these, massive kind of exciting looking attacks, like having the giant photosynthesis cannon that is very quick, having the shockwave slam that can deal massive damage and doesn't have any kind of recharge to it, and even the Sequoia Stampede, depending, yes, it's maybe not that effective, but if you can land the attacks right, it can be very effective. So it's all those go big or go home kind of attacks that Toys for Bob's trying to add into this character, and combining all of that with the tree aesthetic I think is very fun. He is overall a pretty cohesive kind of character in terms of the way he looks. I think the red was an interesting choice to add in because it's not necessarily the first color you would think of for a tree, so I think that's kind of fun. And then even having this almost lime green for the photosynthesis cannon is kind of interesting as well, because yes, you do have his shorts, which are moss, but this is also a almost very different kind of style of green in which it doesn't feel quite that natural, which is kind of one of those things where when I first got this character and was playing as him, I was surprised by a tree having this long-range, gun-like weapon. And that was just one of those, it's such a Skylanders, thing in which you are able to have this character that is so, cohesive in terms of, style and design, but then they also throw in this thing that you're not quite expecting.
I wasn't too caught by surprise with the red incorporated into his design, because to me it felt like they were trying to allude to, a redwood tree. So I feel like it actually really fits there. But yeah, the lime green is definitely one of the more surprising aspects of the colors.
Yeah, and then we also have the light core effect as well, in which his eyes glow blue. And then he also has his cannon that glows this lime green color. So it's one of those things where, as the first Skylander you're getting right out of the box for Giants, he is pretty cool, because no matter whether you're getting the Portal Owners Pack or not, everyone's getting a T-Rex when they buy the game. Being able to see those exciting new light core features and being able to see just how big and exciting these characters, these new at the time characters, could feel, I think T-Rex was a great one to be the example giant, because he feels very menacing and powerful even in figure form as well. He seems like he's going to be that bulky tank-like character that's going to be able to go in and deal all that damage. And not only that, but he has all these other variants as well. We have Gnarly T-Rex, which adds in blue, which I think is an even weirder color choice, but it's kind of interesting. And then we also have Barkley, his mini form, which is exactly the same as T-Rex, but just in a smaller package. And then we have the gnarly version of that as well. Overall, T-Rex, I think, is pretty clearly a a fan favorite. He is like that character that introduced so many people to giants and is like one of the characters that introduced me to Skylanders. So I definitely have a soft spot for him. And overall, his design is just super cool and super cohesive. And he's just like a lot of fun to play as. Like, you're looking for a giant character that plays as a giant, and he's definitely that. So Mia, what would you rank Tree Rex on a scale of 1 to 7?
I hate to say it, Holly, but I would have to rank Tree Rex a 3 out of 7. I like the color scheme. His overall design I felt to be kind of too generic and bland for what they were trying to do, making everything seem bigger and grander. A lot of the giants that were released for this game did not end up being as big and as blocky, and Tree Rex was one of the couple where they kind of leaned into that more. But I feel like they could have gone with a more, like, graceful design, seeing as how he's a tree. And I feel like that would have worked a lot better for him, and also made things like the Sequoia Stampede work better because it might have helped with the maneuverability. Overall, well, I do like a couple aspects of his kit, and I do like his color scheming. There's a lot there that I found to be not enjoyable enough that, yeah, I would rate him a solid 3.
So for me, Tree Rex is one of my favorite characters. So he is one of the ones that, as I said, kind of introduced me to the franchise, so I do have some bias for him. And I think in terms of being able to differentiate Tree Rex from other tree-like characters like, say, Stump Smash, I think they did a pretty good job at making him feel pretty unique and different. I think they were trying to go for maybe a little bit more, like, friendlier looking design compared to the Ents in Lord of the Rings. So because of that, I'm actually going to give him a 7 out of 7. I think Tree Rex is absolutely perfect. He's a great starter giant. I think even though his secondary attacks maybe not the best, I think his overall design makes up for it a lot. I think he just looks super cool and super intimidating and works exactly the way that you would want a giant to look. And so because of that, all these kind of aspects to it, and also throwing in some of that uniqueness, I'm going to give him a perfect score of 7 out of 7. And so with my perfect score to help balance out the 3 out of 7, Tree Rex has a 5 out of 7 Hugo's Handbook rating, which makes him just a little above average. And with that, Hugo picks up the book, Tree Rex disappears, and continues on his way. And that concludes the season premiere episode of Skylanders Portalcasters. We'll see you in the next one. Take it away, Chill Bill.
That concludes this episode of Skylanders Portalcasters. You'll find the website and links to the hosts' individual channels in the description, including their wonderful guests. Follow the Skylanders Portalcasters Twitter for regular updates about this podcast. Until next time, this is Chill Bill with K-Troll signing off.
That's where we eventually find out about the Core of Light being incomplete, and it needs the Eye of the Ancients. Who knows where they're keeping that? Maybe they're keeping the Eye of the Ancients in the hot tub or the cabana.
Right. That.